hello, and happy new year from Relative Pitch. Oh my gosh, we are in 2024, the first episode of the year. Let's give a round of applause for 2024, first of all.
We're making it.
Finally here. We made it somehow, I don't know. But we are super excited to start the year off with an amazing guest, Dr. Stephen Price. Stephen Price just recently joined the faculty of University of Washington and is the inaugural Paul B. Fritts Faculty Fellow and Artist in Residence in Organ Performance. Dr. Price, we are so excited to have you with us today. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And it was just funny because we were just talking off camera about like how the first time we met was in the copy room and then kind of we just started talking and here you are. So my advice to all you students out there, go copy things. Go put yourself in the common areas because you never know what cool faculty members you'll have just like walking about. Well, Dr. Price, I have read so much about you and you have such an amazing like background and educational career and like so just tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump in.
I'm new here in the Pacific Northwest. I just moved to Seattle in July for the artist in residence and organ performance position at the University of Washington. Prior to coming to Seattle, I taught for 5 years at Ball State University, home of Dave Letterman, in Muncie, Indiana. In fact, Dave Letterman created the shirt. I went to the Harvard of Indiana. And he comes back every year. He's a celebrity. Prior to that, I had a full-time church job in San Diego at First United Methodist Church, Mission Valley, San Diego. And then prior to that, I was working on my coursework for the doctorate degree in organ performance at the Jacob School of Music at Indiana University. And I got my master's from there as well. And I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, from the East Coast. Has spent a lot of time on the East Coast and the Midwest. So I'm learning about how to now become a Pacific Northwesterner, So yeah.
Buy a Subaru.
I see.
Oh my gosh, no. I mean, we are obviously lovers of the East Coast on this podcast, specifically also the Southeast, but we just align with any East Coasters whatsoever.
We
Um,
do. We do.
yes. Well, it's so interesting because Oregon, right? I mean, this is like I think Oregon, when I think about Oregon, I immediately think about church. And you already just mentioned how one of your latest positions was it First United Methodist in San Diego? Yeah, I know that you have a background in church music. Can you talk a little bit about how that translated into you going into it as a profession?
It's where I was exposed to the instrument. It was my first introduction to the instrument. I grew up in a Baptist church in Buffalo, New York, and every Sunday they had a different worship style. So I was drawn to the more classical anthems and the reading of the music and the hymns. And the minister of music, Marguerite Robinson, she was my piano teacher, and she arranged to give me free lessons in exchange that I assist her on Sundays at the church. And then the church created like a scholarship fund for me, so they didn't pay me directly. Went into this fund that I could then use for college, and it was a very supportive atmosphere just all around. But that was my first introduction. I was drawn to the instrument. I would sit in the front row by myself like a weirdo just to watch her play. And then I decided pretty early on, by the time I was a teenager, that I wanted to major in organ. So I have a colleague here in Seattle who says the organ is the type of instrument where it chooses you. And after he said that, I thought to myself, I think there's some truth into that, because it's just not an instrument where you are normally exposed outside of the church. You may see it in a concert hall,
Yeah.
but other than that, it's not something that people are just normally exposed to compared to the piano, the other keyboard instrument.
I just look at the organ and I'm like, you had me until you tell me to move my feet because I just be clunking into stuff. And I played a recent service in downtown Atlanta, and there was a couple of times where the organ just like hit the organ, some like the pedals, and we're like, ooh, oh, gotta turn it off.
Actually, that's a really interesting thing because for viewers who may really not know the difference between like how to operate, like they know that I think the sound and what the difference of it looks like, but for audience members who may not know the difference of the operational aspects of a piano and organ, what are like the quick facts to know about the organ?
Well, the organ has an additional keyboard for the feet. So it's just like the keyboard for the hands, but the pedals are much bigger, the foot pedals, and you play them with the feet. And then no two organs are alike. There's no standardization. Each instrument is customized based off of the space and based off of the function. So some organs have one keyboard, and then one of the largest instruments in the US, in the Macy's department store in Philadelphia, has 6 keyboards.
Oh,
And then
wow.
there's one even larger in Atlantic City Hall. So every instrument is different. And then you have different sound combinations that you can get from the different instruments, and that's very important when you're trying to choose registrations for your pieces that you're going to play. So there is a lot more variety in color and in sound, but then it's also a full body workout because you're playing simultaneously with your hands and your feet at the same time.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, with organ, so a lot of the organ music that I think a lot of people are exposed to is church music. And I know as we all went to college, some colleges have the church music degree. Was that your undergraduate experience in church music, or was it organ performance? How was that?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree was in organ performance. In fact, all of my degrees were in organ performance, but I
Mhm.
was fortunate to have an organ scholar position, which is a part-time job. And I played every Sunday, and then I went to weekly rehearsals and worked with the director of music, and then
Mm.
trained further in the Episcopalian tradition. So even though it wasn't church music, I was getting that practical experience.
Right.
And then at Indiana University, they do have that distinction between organ performance and church music.
Mhm.
But no matter your track, they expose all of the organists to church music classes. Some of them are even required.
Mm.
But I say I probably came at it from more of a practical approach and the experience itself of working in churches, and then the added of the academic approach as well.
Mm. Nice.
When you first, I mean, and I'm thinking about like kind of same for me, my own journey of like when I knew that I just didn't want to perform or play for fun. I also wanted to do it like as a career and moving forward. And especially for organ, like my flute, me and her, we can pack up and go anywhere, right? And so in a way, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. Like I can do this. And so like and I think about it the same for like bass, for harp, but I think organ takes the cake in terms of hardest instrument to move around in a small amount of time. So like the practicality of it, what was that like growing up and knowing that okay, I have to practice it. Like, did you have an organ at home? Like, is that normal for people to have organs in their homes?
So you bring up a really good point. If I can just have a little anecdote before
Yeah.
answering the question. When COVID hit,
Mm.
many administrators and at universities, I don't think they didn't realize I just can't pack this up, put this on my back,
Right.
and carry it to my room if I need to practice. I need actual access to the instrument. And in fact, the organ professors around the country, we had sort of a quorum Zoom meeting, emergency quorum Zoom meeting where we talked about this. How can we help our students? Is there a keyboard that then has a pedal board that can be made or rented through an organ company that would be accessible that way? How can they get access to playing with their feet? In the meantime, what can you teach them in the lessons until they can get exposure into the concert halls or the practice rooms where they are? So this is a major problem during COVID. Um, I am just used to going to the space and being by myself in a dark church with the organ light turned on the stand, and practicing. I would come home from school, catch the bus to a church and practice, throughout the week, I would learn my manual parts, say on the piano, because I could do that for the hands. And the French school, they do that a lot too. They practice the manual parts on the piano. And then when I got to the organ, then I would add the pedal parts. But I am just used to being a slave to the instrument and traveling. But as well, that's not always I don't think debilitating to drawing people to the instrument, because there's something neat about having time in those spaces alone. So I studied in France and I studied organ in France, and all of these historic churches where, César Franck, worked, and Messiaen and Saint-Saëns and Vidor. I got to spend time alone in these spaces by myself working on those instruments. And then even here for the University of Washington, the organ program is unique because we have rental contracts with iconic organs all around the city. So every day of the week for lessons and practice, I am meeting students on a different instrument somewhere in the city. Another reason for that, certain organs are built to cater to specific types of repertoire. You have certain instruments that are built in the 17th, 18th century style that caters to Baroque music. You have instruments that are built in the French Romantic style, like Plymouth Church, where Lauren played. So Vidor, Franck, that works so well there because that would be the type of instruments they would have had. You have eclectic instruments that can play mostly everything. So sometimes when you're really wanting to get into the research and the performance practice and the characteristics of a certain style of genre, Baroque versus classical versus romantic versus modern, by going to a specific organ that was built to cater to that music, you can learn so much about the music. So that's another reason why there are these differences.
Wow. I just to think, because again, like a big misconception of organ players is, oh, you can just do the transferable skills between piano and organ are very close, but y'all have more things. And so until you just said it, I don't even think it came to my brain during COVID about organ students, about it. They have to be on the instrument, and those instruments, you cannot bring it to your home. Like, I don't know if you're at your house and you have an organ back there, or is this your office or something? But I know majority of people will not have something like that within their homes or a practice room or somewhere. And especially during COVID, I know it was very difficult.
Yes, certainly.
So,
Oh,
I just had a question for the students that will go to college for organ. Were you in any music programs in high school, like during the day or middle school, whatever, during the day? What kind of programs were you in?
So there was a camp at Westminster Choir College in Princeton, New Jersey, and they did a 1-week organ camp for high school students. So I attended that. Then there's also something called pipe organ encounters, sponsored by the American Guild of Organists. The American Guild of Organists is a national organization, and it's a professional organization that has chapters set up in cities across America. So if you move to a new town and you're looking for a church job, you're looking for sub work, you're looking to connect with other organists, that's an easy way, an easy access point by joining, because then you get the newsletter for the city you're in as far as all the organ activities, you get the magazines, you're kept up to date on that. And so they sponsor POEs, pipe organ encounters, introducing pianists to the organ as well for a week. And it's a 1-week boarding type of situation that happens also in the summer. So I did a couple of those, which were very important because it allowed me to meet other young organists. Because usually when you're starting, you're sort of isolated, unless you happen to live in a city where there are multiple people playing. But I was isolated. I didn't know any young organists until I went to these camps. And some of the people I still stay in touch with to this very day. And in fact, one of the other attendees encouraged me to apply to my undergraduate program because he was already studying with the teacher there. And then that's how I applied and ended up studying with the teacher there. So it's interesting how those relationships blossoms from those music festivals and camps. Yes.
Hmm. Those camps are very important. I can just talk from my own experience at camps and workshops. You developed, you will develop a long-term friendships and collegial relationships with those people that you'll know for 5, 10, 20 plus years. And those are your friends in the field. So those are very important opportunities.
Hmm. Yeah, and I want to like shift to the education aspect of this as well. And I want to start with like for you, you kind of skimmed over a little bit of this amazing thing that you did called Fulbright and the exposure you had of doing Fulbright. And so I think we may have talked about this, but specifically for people who may not know what exactly Fulbright is, can you like talk a little bit about what the process was for that, and then also what your project or what you did during your Fulbright time?
Yes, so this is a grant through the US Department of Education that many people apply for, the William J. Fulbright Grant, and it allows you to do research in another country, and you're seen as a US ambassador at the same time. And so the grant pays for your living expenses and accommodation, and also for your study either at a university or with a specific person, such as a mentor who's willing to take you under their wings for that year. And so I wanted to study French organ music. And my undergraduate program, we would do European tours every January. So that's how I was exposed. So, and every year we would go to a different country representing a different style of music. We would do Austria, South Germany one year, then we would do France the next year, and then we did Italy, or then we did the Netherlands and North Germany the next year, and then we did Central Germany. It would kind of rotate. So that's how I was exposed. And my teacher, Stephen Roberts, he studied on a Fulbright in Vienna, Austria, where he studied the works of Bach. So I had that model. And then there was a Fulbright mentee who helped me with my application, where I filled out basically like a grant proposal, my essay with my proposal, talking about my interest in French organ music. And by going to Toulouse, France, in the south of France, the conservatory still gives access to instruments that were built in the 1800s that Messiaen played and Franck played and Vidor played that are much unchanged. And so as a student at the conservatory, if I were to enroll, I would have access to be able to practice on these instruments and have lessons on these same instruments when I'm playing the music, so that I'm truly understanding the composer's perspective as far as the specific instrument they had in mind when they wrote a particular piece, with the expertise of my teacher, Michel Bouvard.
Hmm. Yeah, Fulbright has always interested me so much because it is such a crazy opportunity. The idea of being like sponsored. You are, the US, your country is basically saying, we sponsor this person to go do this work. And I've just heard so many different stories from professors and mentors about their own experiences and how they use Fulbright within their educational like journeys. And did you do that like was it undergrad or was it during masters?
It was a gap year after my undergrad and before my master's.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
received a diploma from the conservatory for during that gap year, just to make sure, here's proof.
I did it.
I did it.
Okay, I have a maybe a stupid question. Probably not, because people don't know a lot about organ, neither do I. What is the small organ that's often played with the cornetto for Renaissance music?
That's usually called a portative organ.
Okay.
And it's
Okay.
usually one manual, and it's portable. It's easy to kind of transport.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And it's good for early music specifically, and playing in Baroque ensembles or chamber ensembles. Yeah.
Have you played on one of those?
Yes, there are a couple here in the city of Seattle. And recently, the chamber choir at the University of Washington performed the Bach Magnificat. And
Ooh.
so I played on the portative organ in the orchestra for that. And that was a neat experience.
I bet that's a high trumpet part. I would say no so quick.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love
So
that.
do you have like a favorite one that you personally like playing on throughout your entire experience?
There are ones that stick out in my mind. Again, Seattle is an organ mecca, so I am in the right city, the
Mhm.
right place, and there's so many iconic instruments that I knew about here in Seattle before I arrived here. St. Mark's Cathedral, Plymouth, with the wonderful Fisk, St. James Cathedral here in Seattle. But it's so hard to have like a favorite because if I'm playing a particular style of music, then I'll think of an instrument that will showcase that music the best as well. And no matter the organ I go to, I try to bring out the most beautiful colors and
Mhm.
really showcase to the audience what that instrument can do.
Mhm.
I have a like logistical question about like when you're doing performances and recitals because so much emphasis on with specifically with organ of the style in which the organ was created to be performed on. When you think about performances and recitals, do you have you I'm sure that is something you have to think about like okay, if I want to do a recital or a performance at this specific church or wherever, you have to think about your repertoire in those terms too, correct?
Yes, and one basic concept concerning that, am I playing on an organ that has preset buttons for my registrations so that I can set my registrations and save them on that button so that when I come back the next day, all I have to do is push that button and my registrations are there so that I can make all those changes in sound on my own? Or are there no presets and do I have to have a registrant come and manually pull out the stops for me? That's a lot more work on my part because I have to figure all that out, write that down, and then practice with the registrant. And so I don't want to play a piece that's too complicated or has too many changes
Mhm.
in a case on an organ that doesn't have any presets.
Hmm.
So that's an important thing to know.
Mhm. Yeah, so it really is not just a, oh, I'll figure it out when I get there kind of
Now
situation.
you have to, whenever you play a recital, you usually go, I like to go maybe 3 days in advance. And
Mhm.
I call it developing a relationship with the instrument. And
Mhm.
hopefully on the day of the performance, the instrument is an old friend.
Um, that is, I've never thought about like I know this is like for pianists when they're collaborating, sometimes they have the page turner. I've never thought about sometimes when you're organist, you have the person that's like gonna help you do all the stops. Because I've always seen these little buttons and I always get scared because someone would do a preset and they change. I'm like, what happened? I'm like, it sounds cool, but like that was witchcraft.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure it was seen that
right.
way.
And then you get into, is the instrument built in more the French romantic flavor? So then if that's the case, then maybe German Baroque music won't work so well. Or is it built in an idiom of Bach? So then if that's the case, then maybe modern music won't work so well on that. So then you also get into that too, as far as the color
Mhm.
and the character of the instrument itself. Because you always want to choose music that will showcase that instrument to the best of its ability, because you never know when it's someone's first time experience the organ, and you want them to have a good experience, hopefully.
Mhm. So,
So
um, did you always want to be a professor, to teach? Was like your main goal from undergrad to perform or a mix of both?
I think a mix of both, to perform, to teach, and to be a church musician. I've had such wonderful teachers. I spent the longest time with my teacher at IU, Jeanette Fishel, who is a fabulous teacher, can take anyone and really transform them as far as their technique, as far as their understanding of performance practice and style, even within a style. What's the difference between the organ works of Brahms versus the organ works of Mozart versus the organ works of Mendelssohn, to that a finite detail. And so she truly inspired me. And so my document, my doctoral dissertation was on pedagogy, where I talked about that. When you get a piece, how do you first place it in a style? And then what does that mean as far as your physical gestures into and out of the key to achieve the articulation you need to match the style?
Mhm.
And so she very much inspired me with that. And I would say, because I spent so much time, doing that, I really, after that point, really wanted to teach even more, to try out my ideas, right? on
Yeah.
the students to see, the outcome.
Mm.
That's actually the question that I was gonna. It was a little bit different, but Anthony touched exactly on what I wanted to know. Like when you are an organist, like is the idea that, oh, I can perform, I can be like a church musician as a career, I can like teach as a career, like those, because that's really interesting. Because like I guess like for myself, I never thought about, oh, like I could be a church musician for my as a flutist, even though we know that there are many churches who have full-time orchestras, and especially there's a lot of great sacred flute music, and I'm called for many things, but that's just it's so funny because that was never something that I just thought of. And for you, that's just so, I think, normal for organists to be like, oh, I could literally do a job at a church, which I think is more aligned with Anthony, vocalist as well, like being music directors as well of churches and having those like jobs. Like I think I don't know, I guess for career wise, I'm like, oh yeah, I guess if I'm talking to a student who's an organ student, they would be, oh yeah, I'm thinking about being a church musician. I would go, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes, and here in Seattle, there are many churches looking for organists now.
Mm,
So
mhm.
Mm.
this is prime real estate here.
Calling all organists, move to
Yes.
Seattle.
So on that, is there other like big cities that come to mind? Because you said Seattle was like a mecca for church or organs. Is there other big cities that come to mind across the United States that are like, that's a good city for organ and like all this other stuff?
So you said that you are in Atlanta.
Mhm.
Yes.
So Atlanta, the Cathedral of St. Philip, there are several Presbyterian churches in
Mhm.
Atlanta. I have several friends who have full-time church music positions in Atlanta. So that scene is very vibrant with choirs and
Oh,
orchestras and all of that. Atlanta, Chicago, of course, New York City, with all of their churches, St. Patrick, St. Thomas, St. John the Divine, Boston, LA, San Diego. So, and then of course the Midwest or anything along the Bible Belt where people are still going to church, and it's very important for them to go in the traditional sense, in a
mhm.
mainline church where you're going to find a pipe organ. So any of those regions as well. Yes.
Mm.
And in fact, it's interesting because for so long you might find one of these churches where the organist was there for 90 years and then they pass away or what have you. And then the churches are then going through that process of trying to form committees or figuring out how can we preserve this tradition and keep it alive. And that's why I think organ scholar positions are so important. A person, 'cause that's how I got started, where
Yeah.
I was apprenticing with the current director, on a regular basis, going to rehearsals with the director, sitting by their side, watching them play, playing along with them on Sunday, to learn the craft, to learn the skill. It's so, so very important because then that's how you'll foster this art form of sacred music to the next generation, because it doesn't just happen. You can't just push a button and someone is ready to go. There has to be a training period. There has to be a training period to learn the skill.
So is that one of your like educator like missions is to maybe bring a lot of organ scholars to around Seattle and have your students when they come be like, hey, I have a really good rate of placing people as an organ scholar. Then you're going to study there on the weekends, you're going to study here, and you're going to have like some on-hand experience while you're studying academically.
Yes, and also because Seattle has so many great church musicians, so many talented church musicians here. I mean, it's like hand in glove. I mean, who you would get to work with
Yeah.
in the places here in Seattle and the church music programs that you become a part of, that would be inform your education so much when you then go out to apply for the job. Having that experience already on your resume while you're in school, when you're then when you're done, being able to then apply for those church music positions. So yes, that is one of my missions.
Hmm.
Mm.
I just like thought about something while we were talking about careers of organ. This could be dumb. Baseball. What like I mean, I'm being so serious. Like, is there like, have you ever been asked to do the organ at a baseball game, or like, how do you? Because I don't even think about it. I just like go to the Mariners game, or I go to the Atlanta Braves game, and we just know we're gonna hear the organ. It's gonna be there, and sometimes I'm like, is there a real person up there, or is that like a record? Michael's face looks.
I don't watch baseball or have been to a baseball game. So when you
Oh,
said it Oregon, I'm like, what are you talking about?
it's a common
Yeah.
thing.
And
Yeah.
I think even basketball games too.
Yeah.
I think even basketball games too.
Mhm.
So yeah, I know those are positions that are held long time posts by someone that has been doing it for a number of years. I don't particularly know anyone personally. I don't know any colleagues that have gone into those, but yeah, that's also another option, and probably is a world of its own. I'm pretty sure that they have their own guild,
I'm
like
sure.
League of Sport Organists. I'm sure it exists somewhere. So yeah.
So what do they do during the games? I'm now very
They
confused.
basically play like little stand tunes. But God,
Right.
that is very
Oh,
common at a baseball game. And okay, let me just say for all the relative pitch listeners, if Anthony, me, is talking about sports to others, it means it's a common thing, y'all. It's a
no, it does not. No, it does not. Because literally, I'm over here like
I saw your face freaking out. Like I could see you
I
spiral.
was I was just like, what?
Yes, yes.
Like,
Well, I mean, I think that goes to the point of there are so many opportunities for organists and for other musicians that, may not be the stereotypical route. There you can end up playing in so many different places. And I'm sure you've had students or colleagues that are now doing, many things in many different careers, but they're still playing organ. How about some of those students that you've come up upon?
Yes, yes, certainly. Yeah. One thing I noticed here at the UW, they foster interdisciplinary study. So
Mhm.
several of my students are double major, computer science in Oregon, engineering in Oregon, and engineering in Oregon could even foster organ building, somebody interested in actually then going into that field. Medicine in Oregon. So certainly. And then they work their regular job during the week, and then they have a church job on the weekend as a part-time organist. I know several people who do that, or even theater organ, people who are interested in theater organ and doing silent film accompaniment or playing theater organ concerts. I know somebody who's a lawyer during the day and then goes away on the weekend playing, on theater organs. So yes,
Yeah.
certainly.
this is interesting. I love all this.
I feel like I'm learning. I'm literally just like, Professor, give me more knowledge. Like I need more of this. Like, but well, I'm so interested because as you're talking about now theater organ, we're talking about like the idea of using organ for sports, like that idea of like modern repertoire for organ. What does that even sound like? I'm in my head. I think I'm trying to like imagine like what the push of repertoire is, or like what the conversations around modern contemporary repertoire for organ are like, you know?
Yes, the current one of the organists at the Royal Albert Hall in London, Anna Lapwood. She's a new star. She was recently interviewed on Good Morning America and featured on Classical FM. I think she just won an award. She is known for taking movie score arrangements and adapting them to the organ. So she started with Interstellar, that actually includes organ. That score actually includes organ. And then from there, she did a couple of other Hans Zimmer arrangements. She's done Pirates of the Caribbean, that film score. So that's, I know, a new venture that the profession is starting to explore, because she has been so very successful in gaining friends into the 21st century for the instrument and
Mhm.
thinking in an unconventional manner. Playing transcriptions, playing orchestral transcriptions, which is not anything new. I mean, the beginning of the 20th century, late 19th, into the early 20th century, playing, transcriptions by orchestra where one man could do it all, really gave the term, king of instruments, to the organ. And so that's also starting to come back as well. So yeah, the profession is starting to venture out. Video game music, video game scores on the organ. I know there are people that are interested in doing that. So yes, all of these ideas are starting to play into the profession. Yeah.
Okay, now I have questions. Does organ sheet music look like piano sheet music?
There's an extra stave, right? So you have treble clef, bass clef for the hands, and then bass clef again for the feet. So there's three
Mm.
that you're reading at the same time.
I would get so lost.
Wait, but then what is it? What does it look like if you're playing with like a score with an instrument? Like, is it?
So if you have the instrumental part, then there's another, yeah, yeah,
Okay, so
that's added.
when there's not presets. Okay, so now, okay, whole nother question.
Mm.
Do you come up with the knobs, or is that built into the score?
It depends on the style. So for instance, Bach rarely wrote registrations into his music, but we have a lot of documentation regarding the performance practice of what you do. The French, they were very particular. They give you everything they want as far as the registrations for their scores, because the instruments built in France were so specific to the music. So they're very specific. German romantics, no, they don't really give you a lot of information. You have to study the instrument, and you can look up what the registration list was like in order to kind of tell, and through the study of performance practice. So yeah, it depends on the composer that you are playing.
Okay, no, so I'm so sorry. So now to dive in even further. So like the French would give you all the things, right? Are you a person who like listens to them? Or do you like, I like that you said that, but I kind of want to do it a little bit differently this way?
Mm.
Oh gosh, you're trying to get me into trouble.
That is a legitimate
Purist.
question.
I I try not to be a purist because every organ is different, and also every space,
It's different.
Mm.
right? The unnamed stop on every organ. Is it a reverberant room or is it a dry room?
Mm.
Also plays into this. So I'm a fan of, you have to know the rules to break them.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm all about context. I would never just randomly, you know, I'm just gonna pull this stop right now, this trumpet stop, and play this quiet, reflective piece on this trumpet stop because I wanted to sound angry instead. So I like to understand the composer. I like to understand who the composer's teacher was. And then I also like to understand where music was going whenever I'm studying any piece, to understand the relationship to the instrument and how I want to interpret and what sounds I want to pull.
So what you're saying is all musicians should be like organ musicians, where we should study more to make sure we can break said rules. Oh, love this.
I mean, because I think music is so, the evolution of music is so fascinating. It's so fascinating, from the early vocal works to then how that evolved into like singing in the bars or on the street with the guitar and lute and voice, and then how that evolved into opera, and then how opera evolved into art songs. And so how did that style happen? It didn't just happen overnight. But what were the social constructs and the artistic constructs? And then, of course, that affected the organ and the organ music, especially in the 19th century, where then organ music was being composed in the symphony style, with Franck. And so where did that come from? What is the influence there? Because then it informs you. You're making interpretive decisions from an informed place, which in my opinion gives you more parameters. It widens your parameters. Because then you can decide, well, no, I'm not going to go this way. I'm going to go this way instead. And here's why.
Okay. Last question, and I will stop like hijacking the whole thing. For people out there who don't listen to organ, aka me and other people, what are 4 big pieces that could get them exposed to maybe different errors or what the organ can do that's not like blasting at the end of Christmas Eve church hymn, "Oh Come All Ye Faithful."
Well, of course, everybody knows the Toccata and Fugue in D minor by Bach, which we don't even know if it's actually written by Bach. It's attributed to Johann Sebastian Bach, but we don't know if he actually wrote it. There's the Widor Toccata, Charles-Marie Widor, the French organist who was organist at Saint-Sulpice, and also the organ professor at the Paris Conservatory. He later became the director. I believe there was an English royal for their wedding that they had the Widor Toccata played, and this is when the weddings were televised, so anybody over the all over the world could hear the music. So the Widor Toccata, Interstellar, the organ part in the movie Interstellar, just to kind of bring it into that film media, is a really cool soundtrack while you're looking at the film, because they're using an organ in London that's very reverberant. I think it's like in like a church that has like stone material, so it uses the very deep sounds of the instrument, and the organ like uses full organ when the rocket takes off and blasts off. So that's very effective. And then I would say, oh, you said 4 pieces. Gosh, can I just stop at 3?
You
I
could
can go in any direction, but
okay, I like that.
I think for my last question would be, how important was it for you and for your students to find their voice in organ playing? And how long did it take for you to decide, this is my voice, this is, my philosophy on playing this instrument?
I'm still finding my voice because there's over 500 years of repertoire. And I try to understand it all. Some people do specialize, like I'm a Baroque organist, or I'm more of a romantic, but I am still finding my voice. But I think that's very important, to be authentic to yourself. There are some people who play Bach in a more orchestral, romantic way on the organ, and it works. It moves you when you hear it. So, and I think you can tell when a person is playing and they haven't found their voice. I think that's also apparent in the performance as well. So I think that's so important. But I think it's an unending journey. An end to a means. Unending journey that I'm certainly still on myself. Recently, I would say in my own practice, I'm listening to more orchestral music and instrumentalists and singers, and deciding upon phrasing. Because Stravinsky made the comment, the organ is a monster that never breathes. Because literally you can hold the chord forever. Until you lift, that's when the sound stops. So phrasing and breath, I'm listening to more instrumentalists, especially in Baroque music. I'm listening to Baroque ensembles and Baroque chamber groups to understand articulation and all of that. So yeah, listening to my colleagues and other musicians, listening to a wide variety of styles. Also, I think is kind of helping me find my voice as well.
Wow. I feel like I've learned I'm sure there's like more to learn about the organ, but I feel like as a person who's come in with a very limited amount of knowledge about how the organ works and just in general, how the organ, the careers you can have in it, pedagogy, this was a beautiful introduction for myself, I'm sure, as well as my colleagues and everyone listening. And also to hear about how you found your way to the organ and how you are still on your journey is very inspiring as a student, who's currently going through, especially with all your accolades and things you've already accomplished. And to hear that you're like, I'm still on this journey, I'm still learning and moving forward. It's very encouraging, very aspirational. And just thank you so much for taking time to share your knowledge and your experiences with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And so everyone, please, we'll make sure to link everything about Dr. Price below, any upcoming events he's doing, anything, or just whatever sources he wants to share with y'all, we'll make sure to link it. We really hope that this was a very educational and very interesting journey we went on together and that you got to experience. And thank you for being with us for our first episode of 2024. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.